Yes, sir. Thank you.
Garcia, Tony Garcia, can you hear me okay? Good afternoon, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. I'll turn the video on shortly.
That's fine, sir. I just want to make sure you hear us okay. Mr. David Ramirez, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
10-4. Saul, good afternoon. Your audio, can you hear us okay? Jonathan, good afternoon. Can you hear us okay?
Loud and clear, sir.
10-4. Good afternoon, Commissioner Fuentes. Can you hear me okay, sir?
Yes, sir. And I'm ready to go whenever we start.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Should work now.
Uh-huh.
You want to try it?
Okay.
I think you're muted. I know you're not muted.
It's ready to go.
Like there, yeah, you can talk there.
Hello.
It shows there that it's working.
Good afternoon, Ms. Lambert. Can you hear us okay?
I can. How are you doing today?
Doing great, ma'am. Thank you.
I'll try it again.
Hello.
Yes, sir, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, sir. Tony Garcia, Stark County Planning. I'm here for Raul Peña, Commissioner, Stark County.
Okay, sir. Tony Garcia.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Jaime,
Yes, sir, Chairman.
it's 2:00. Could you please do roll call?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Jaime Salazar with the Hidalgo County Drainage District Number 1. Doing roll call for today's Region 15 meeting. Today's July 21st, 2022, and the time is 2 p.m., 2:01 p.m. Mr. Jose Hinojosa, voting members, Jose Hinojosa.
Mr. Hinojosa will not be joining us today, okay?
Okay, sir, thank you.
He had a medical problem he's dealing with.
Yes, sir. Chairman David Garza,
Present?
Mr. Daniel Lucio. I know that we have a Mr. Raul Trevino from AP on the line with us. Mr. Trevino, if you can please turn on your camera.
Oh, you see me?
Yes, sir.
Mr.
All right.
Trevino.
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Welcome. Mr. Hudson Deoy. Mr. Deoy. Commissioner David Fuentes.
Present.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Mr. Joey Trevino. Mr. Joey Trevino. Mr. Joe Khalifa. Mr. Khalifa, I know he's on. I talked to him earlier.
Yeah, he's there,
Yes.
but there you go. You're on, Joe.
Turn your camera on, please. Mr. Jose Caso, I know we have a proxy for.
Present. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Mr. Jose Caso or his proxy.
Good afternoon, Laura Haley on behalf of Jose Casa.
Welcome, Ms. Haley. Good afternoon. Good to see you again, ma'am.
Nice to see you too.
Ms. Sonia Lambert.
He was on.
I saw her earlier.
Present, I'm sorry, I'm
That's fine, ma'am.
on mute.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Riazul Mia. Mr. Riazul Mia. Commissioner Eduardo Gonzalez. Commissioner Eduardo Gonzalez. Mr. Raul Peña Jr. I believe Mr.
Present.
Tony-
For
Tony Garcia.
Tony Garcia for Raul Peña.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Just a reminder for those of you voting members who I'm calling out right now, you do need to have your camera on during the meeting, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Alan Moore. Mr. Alan Moore. And Mr. Rene Estrada. Mr. Rene Estrada. Non-voting members, Mr. Willie Cupid.
Yes, I'm here.
Good afternoon, sir.
Am I coming in all right?
Yes, sir. Can hear you just fine. Mr. Brian Hertug. Ms. Nelda Barrera. Mr. Adrian Perez. Ms. Shonda Mace.
Yes, Mr. Salazar, this is Elijah Casas as her proxy.
Welcome, Mr. Casas. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Megan Ingram.
Present, Jaime, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Mr. David Ramirez.
President Jaime.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. Mr. Manny Cruz.
I don't believe he's jumped on board yet, Jaime, but I'm here.
Okay.
Rick Carrera,
Thank
LRGBC.
you, Rick. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Ramon Macias. Ms. Lupita Trinidad Ramos. Mr. Nick Gallegos. And Ms. Michelle Garcia. And we do have Mr. Alan Moore present. Chairman, we do have a quorum, sir.
Thank you so much, Jaime.
Yes,
If
sir.
anybody else comes on that you notice, please alert us so we can make sure and count them present. Okay.
Yes, sir.
We do have a quorum. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We'll try to move through this information as expeditiously as we can. We have a number 3 is discussion. Any written comments, written public comments that you've received, Jaime?
No, sir. Not as of
Okay.
yet. No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And just, Mr. Deoy is on the meeting, sir. Mr. Hudson Deoy.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Hudson, yeah, for joining us. Item number 4 is discussion and action as appropriate. Consider approval of the minutes from the previous meeting of May the 18th. Everybody received those with their packet. If there's any additions, deletions, or any other corrections, now's your chance. If there isn't, I will entertain a motion to approve as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Sonia. Is there a second?
Second, Ms. Hudson.
Thank you, Dr. Dale. Any other discussion? Not, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries and the minutes are approved. Item number 5, discussion and update from the Texas Water Development Board, and I believe we've got someone on board. Megan, I think you're on.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Hi, everyone. It's good to see everyone after a very brief hiatus of the past couple months. I really don't have any updates today, Commissioner, except to say that today's a really big day and y'all have made great progress up until this point. So today, I'm really hopeful that we're going to be approving submission of the draft plan to the Water Development Board. And I know your technical consultant team has a lot of great things to unpack. So I just want to congratulate you on getting to this point because it is a milestone day. So I'm here if there are any questions and for further discussion. But that's all I have today. So thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Anything you can do to get our contract signed, that'd be great. Item number 6 is approval and certification of administrative expenses incurred by the planning group sponsor for the development of the regional flood plan. Jaime, what do you have for us?
At this time, I don't have anything to present, so no action on this item. Chairman.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Item number 7.
Commissioner Garza?
Yes.
I apologize. I just wanted to clarify your comment. We do have a signed executed contract amendment between the district and the Water Development Board. So that is done as of, I think, a couple weeks ago.
Okay, because I had not been notified of anything. Jaime, I will go ahead and allow you to, I'll go back to an item number 5. Can you have it in hand already?
Yes, sir. We do have our agreement in hand with the Texas Water Development Board. What we're pending right now is our supplemental agreement with our consultant half, which would be on the agenda for this Tuesday coming up, sir.
Okay, so then it's going to be at the commissioners meeting.
Yes,
So
sir.
we should be ready to go. Thank you so
Yes, sir.
much.
We're good to go. Our executed, and we had received approval from the board to move forward on that agreement.
Right.
So we're just gonna get the signatures that we need.
Okay, thank you so much. That will help a whole lot for the
Yes, sir.
process to continue. Okay. Next item is number 7, which is discussion and update by the technical consultant. And, Christina, you're on, I believe.
Yes, Chairman, I'm here. Let me
Okay.
share my screen.
Okay, please do. And I'm going to ask the group that if we could follow this format, please, if you don't mind. I'm going to ask Christina to share the presentation with the tasks as identified and introducing them to us in a manner in which she can give us the brief information on. Some of them are very simple because they're just pretty much some revisions that are minor in nature. And hold your questions till she gets done with her short presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions and get that done that way, just to facilitate the meeting.
Yes, Jaime, I don't have access to share. It says I'm disabled from sharing.
I'll take care of that, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm still not able to do it. Do I need to do something on my side, Jaime? Oh, there we
Share.
go. There, can y'all see my screen?
Not yet, Christina.
Not yet.
It's coming up, I believe, maybe.
There.
Yes. Yeah, you're on.
Okay, great. So thank you, Chairman, Regional Flood Planning Group, Jaime. we have a lot to go over today. Like Chairman said, the draft regional flood plan is due in Austin on August 1st. So today I'll be presenting the remaining items, and I'll try to be really brief. I know there's a lot of information to unpack, but I do want you to understand what we are presenting. But I do ask that you provide any comments and feedback in an email or another form so that we can address them in the coming months, because we can revise the amended draft as long as we've received a comment. So that is my request. The date of August 1st, we can't move because that was set up with the same legislation that set up the Regional Flood Planning Group and this effort. So if there are any comments that are very significant and we can't address in the remaining part of this year, we always have a second option or a second way of amending the plan, and that is with the plan amendment, which, we're amending this first plan on July 14, 2023. So if we don't get to, we'll get to the comments by the end of the year, or if not, if it's significant where, it'll be handled over multiple meetings, we still have that other deadline. So just wanted to put that out there before we start. So it is from July when the 5-year cycles start. So let's get started. And these are the agenda items in order.
Again, I just want to make sure, Christina, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this is what has been developed to be submitted. Any comments, emails, or calls that need to be made to Christina can be made to her, and she will make sure and include them in any subsequent adjustments that are made to the plan. But what you're seeing now is basically what will be submitted under the draft plan that is required to be there by August 1st. Okay, so keep that in mind, make notes, and make sure Christina knows on any concerns that you might have.
Great, thank you, Chairman. Thank you. So task 3, let's just finish up our conversation on standards, at least for the moment. And the only reason I'm bringing this back, I mean, this just shows you, we've been working on this since October, and we've had a lot of really good conversations, and it's built on a lot of good information. And what you see here are the 5 standards that were approved at our last meeting. The reason we're revisiting these today is I got 2 comments, and the first comment I came from Chairman Garza. We have two of the standards were recommended for adoption, and the other 3 were recommended as recommended standards. And Chairman Garza wanted us to revisit and make sure that we understood, or that we were good with recommending adoption, because I don't know if you want to enlighten the group, Chairman, on why.
Yes, be more than happy to, Christina. On a monthly basis, the chair of all of the different flood plan and infrastructure groups have a call, and we share with each other the status of where we're at, what we're doing, and the direction in which we're getting some of our plans worked on. And in the discussions that we had, there were 2 items, and if you want to move down to both of them, Christina, scroll through them, that we recommended for adoption. This is the first one, and this was entities should base their base flood elevations on regional flood maps in the absence of detailed hydraulic and hydrologic information. We had recommended that we adopt this standard region-wide. And can you go to the next one, please?
Here we get to the next one.
Yeah.
Oh,
this
the next one, this one.
This one. Go ahead and read it for me, because my screen is kind of chopped up.
Sure. The second one that was recommended for adoption is where injury, sickness, or loss of life has happened, or where structural mitigation alternatives are not practical or otherwise infeasible, communities should have a buyout program to buy out properties if funding is available. The program should assist owner relocates to areas with reduced flood risk. to
Yeah,
relocate.
and the recommended action we had taken was to adopt. One of the things that I found out through one of the meetings, or our last meeting of the chairs, was that by adopting these particular standards, it will preclude and not allow many of the communities to be able to include some of their proposals into the plan, because adoption is something that would require a significant amount of work, either at the county or at the municipality level, or at the drainage district level, or whatever other entity is involved in applying for the potential mitigation projects. So if we move for adoption, we are going to eliminate many opportunities for some of the folks that don't have the resources to be able to get that work done in a timely manner. If we move to recommendation, it does not preclude all these folks from being able to apply for opportunities as they come up with the Water Development Board in relation to this fund. So out of the 15 districts, we were the only 2 that had taken action on these tasks, on task 3 and these 2 recommended standards to adopt. And I wanted you all to make sure, I mean, we can keep it that way, but we're going to have many folks that will not be able to access being able to even submit their projects for consideration. So, I would recommend, my recommendation is we follow along with the rest of the state floodplain and infrastructure groups and just recommend, not adopt.
Commissioner, this is Hudson. Could you give an example of things that they could not do if we stuck with adoption? Is there possible to give an example?
Yeah, we can give an example, Christina. We talked about a couple of them.
Right. So if you recommend adoption, then for that entity to, and really we're doing region wide. So it'd have to be for anyone in the region to be able to apply for monies in the future under programs funded by the Water Development Board. They would have to have changed their codes, their ordinances to adopt. So we're requiring the entities to adopt this standard into their local, codes, so that and prove that before they can be approved for any of the funding. So we're making it like another requirement to funding through the Water Development Board.
So again, if they don't adopt locally, then their opportunities, not being specific, they cannot apply for just because they haven't adopted X and Y.
Right.
Exactly. Am I correct, Megan? That was my understanding.
That is my understanding too, Christina.
Yeah. And when I told them what we had done, it was kind of like, it was interesting because, why are you doing that? You're precluding people and you're eliminating some potential folks, especially some of the smaller municipalities or some of the smaller counties that don't have any personnel that can help them do some of this work, and it would do nothing. I mean, the change would not do anything for those of us that have standards. It would just preclude those that don't have the adopted recommendation.
And so I've written it like this in the draft, but I can easily change it and it's a change of recommendation. So my question really is, do you want to continue with the wording of it being adopted, or should it be changed to recommended so that it aligns with the rest of the regional flood planning groups?
And it's in those 2 particular recommended standards.
Just in those 2, yes. And there's another comment that will further change one of these same ones. I don't know if you want me to go over that right now.
Well, I'd rather kind of
address this. Okay.
Let's see.
Chairman, this is Sonia. I don't think we need to be making it any more difficult for anybody to be able to apply for the funding. So I would like to recommend that we list it as a recommended standard and not not a requirement.
Okay.
Well,
Uh,
I
I would
will,
look at
this is
that.
Hudson. I will say it's based on ignorance, at least on my part, when what I thought we were recommending adopting sounded like a good thing, but I didn't know it precluded them from getting funding for other stuff. That was just ignorance on my part.
No, it's ignorance on all of our parts, Dr. Deo, because I think we all thought the same way when we adopted. Is Alan on? I'd like to
Yes.
hear. What are your thoughts, Alan? I know you're like where the rubber meets the road on a lot of stuff, so.
I think it should be recommended and not the mandatory adoption.
Okay.
Give the people the
Anyone-
latitude to get money to do improvements, and then maybe they can get there in the future.
Okay. Anyone else on that wishes to make a comment, I mean,
Chairman Garza, just want to let everybody know Commissioner Eduardo Gonzalez has joined the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fuentes?
Yes, sir. I mean, I'm listening to everything that you guys are saying. I mean, I'm with you, Commish. I think the recommendation is important to get going so that we can get things rolling.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need to take an action on this?
Yes, I
Jaime?
would like to take action. That way it's officially recorded, Christina, since we had it differently. So,
Okay.
On this particular task and these two standards, I will entertain a motion to change them from adoption to recommended region-wide.
I so move.
Okay.
I'll second. Second,
Okay.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I know we had a long discussion when we were approving this in the first, some meetings, months ago. And, I mean, we went back and forth on it considerably. So, but now we know more. So anyway, all those in favor of doing this, say aye.
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 All
Great.
those opposed, say no. Hearing no nos, action is, and you can do this to the draft plan easily, okay?
Will do. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Christina. Now you can move on to the next task.
Thank you. And I just want to say this is a great example of, nothing's written in stone at this point. If there are any other items in the draft, that you want to revisit, we can. The goals, the process, everything is up for revision right now. After the regional flood plan gets accepted, I think there will be like an official amendment process that we need to go through. But while it's being worked out, this is when you really want to make the changes and revisit items. So the other comment that we received had to do with the first one, which is entities should base their base flood elevations on FEMA firm maps in the absence of detailed hydrologic and hydraulic studies. And it's really in the way that it was worded. So the comment was the use of BLE, which BLE stands for base level engineering, flood risk maps, is not really accounted for by the way it's written, because we're saying that if you don't have a detailed study, then you have to use the firm maps. And so base level engineering is not exactly a detailed study. It is a FEMA approved mapping of flood risk. They're updating the hydrology. That means that they're using like Atlas 14, the more current and a lot of times like the heavier rainfall data that we're supposed to be designing to. It updates the land use. So, a lot of our firm maps are, in some cases over 40 years old. And this is going to account for all of that growth. So it's updating the land use and it's updating the terrain. So it doesn't go through and do a detailed study like you do for a firm, but it's still going through a lot of the same steps. It is still being approved by FEMA. And they're putting it out there really because to go through a firm remapping, it's like years and it's a lot of work, but they can do this and they're putting these out just so that there is better flood risk mapping out there. And In fact, they're completing these lower counties or watersheds in these lower areas. We already got the one from the South Laguna Madre, the lower area. And I think Hidalgo, the one that carries a lot of Hidalgo, has already been released, I think a month ago. And they're finishing the part that goes over Starr County. And that should be completed by 2024. So they're putting a big investment and putting out some more of this information. And so the comment is, they're recommending rewarding it so that it allows for that. And I'm suggesting that we just add, in the absence of detailed hydrologic or H&H studies or BLE studies, just adding that provision.
And on this one, again, we would need just to take action to agree. Okay?
Correct.
So are there any comments that anyone has or any issues that anyone has in regards to adding or base level engineering studies to the proposed revision? If not, again, I will entertain a motion to make sure we get it approved and on record. Eddie, are you
So moved.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Okay, it was motion made by Alan Moore, second by Eddie Gonzalez. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Okay, this is taken care of for you, Christina, as we move on.
Thank you. And
Excuse
so I'm
me.
going to skip over the
Excuse me,
rest.
Christina and Chairman, just wanted to notify the committee that Mr. Rene Estrada has joined the meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And so I'm going to turn this section over. We've been trying to present this for the last couple of months to Jonathan Precoup with the SMB. So Jonathan.
Good afternoon. This is Jonathan with SMB. As Christina mentioned, I will be presenting task 8, which is the administrative, regulatory, and legislative recommendations. We touched base on this not at the last meeting, but the previous one where we requested feedback, and I just wanted to present the feedback that we received as well as how it made our way into the draft document that we had prepared for y'all. So as a recap, the purpose of this task is for the Regional Flood Planning Group to voice their recommendations to Texas Water Development Board and the state of Texas regarding regional flood planning. What is necessary to facilitate flood management and flood mitigation implementation, and other recommendations for the regional flood planning considered necessary to meet the desired goals for the flood mitigations. As we mentioned last week, we took recommendations over 2 weeks, and this discussion for inclusion would be at the next meeting, which would have been May. However, because of the timeline, we moved forward with the information we had. So this will be the summary of what it is. And as Christina mentioned, if we have any comments about how we presented the information that we received, we can address it during the comment period. So some of the recommendations that we received from a legislative, regulatory, or administrative standpoint of what the state of Texas and Texas Water Development Board should do regarding regional flood planning is the comments that we received was, one of the commenters wanted to establish a 100-year timeline for future planning studies. This would just be carrying on from one planning study to the next, give a long-range goal for all studies to plan going forward. In general, it's more of a tracking mechanism to supplement what I think they already do during the 20 and 30-year goals that are taken care of in the one. This would just be extending that to 100 years. They recommended changes or establishment of implementing funding opportunities. The comments that we received were they wanted to make funding opportunities more available so that the goals for the FMXs could be reached by each of the individual project sponsors. And we received some things regarding the requirements of future planning studies, which covers more of the other ones, such as the 100-year the flood plan, as well as some of the other ones that we'll cover later on in this section. And then as well as changes to qualifying requirements for funding programs, such as a project must be beneficial to have a positive BCA in order to be included on this funding studies. These are developed based off of benefit cost analysis and what happens when a community is in dire need but doesn't have the economic basis to justify that cost. And also versus rural and urban counties, there are currently no provisions there are very few programs that actually have provisions for rural versus urban for flood mitigation. And as a result, the counties or the areas that have high benefits, such as urban developments, kind of get a lot more of the funding versus the rural communities that might not. As well as one of the things that we have seen other groups do and recommend is adding a legislative ability to allow counties to establish and access drainage stormwater utility fees, so that instead of pulling it from a general fund, they can pull it from this drainage utility fee in order to direct focus funds into implementation of these flood mitigation strategies. So in our report, these are the recommendation statements that we included in our report and that cover the comments that we received. So flooding does not recognize jurisdictional boundaries, remove barriers that prevent jurisdictions from working together to provide regional floodplain mitigation solutions or regional detention across jurisdictional boundaries. Funding for projects that benefit agricultural activities should not be scored or awarded based on traditional benefit cost ratios. Funding for projects in historically disadvantaged communities or areas of persistent poverty should be allocated a minimum amount of future funding so that they are not competing against more fortunate communities. Separate funding should be made available for each of the different aspects of floodplain management, such as development of floodplain maps, flood planning studies, advanced project management, and development of floodplain management projects, as well as implementation of floodplain management projects. And then the final one, require the future regional flood planning studies develop and maintain that 100-year timeline for the continued development moving forward. Continuing on, those were the administrative and regulatory requirements. These are the legislative recommendations. They counted them into separate categories. That's why they're broken up here. Similarly, add the legislative ability for allow counties or to the opportunity to establish and assess drainage stormwater fees. This legislation needed to allow counties and others with flood control responsibilities to establish that utility fee and collect fees for that service. So this is the language, just extend that local government code Title 13 to allow for the establishment of a utility fee. Provide alternative revenue generating sources to expand the eligibility for use of stormwater and flood management solutions, either by local, state, federal, public, private partnerships, etc. And then expansion of the requirements for future planning studies, i.e. what the planning studies need to do to cover all of the bases that are, we cover so much here, but there are gaps that may be missing during later ones. So with that, are there other legislative, regulatory, or administrative recommendations that the regional flood planning should recommend to the state of Texas and the Texas Water Development Board regarding regional flood planning? Or is there?
Well, Jonathan, there could be others, but I think that in the essence of time, that I will ask everyone, to look over this particular task and administrative, regulatory, and legislative recommendations. And if there's other ones, please remember, this is a draft document that we will be able to amend. If we provide that information to you all, it can be added as we move through the process and considered for approval by the board.
Yes. So I believe Christina asked earlier that if we receive comments, put them in writing, that way we could append them later.
Right.
So just for the sake of doing, this is what we have in our document right now.
Right.
So
unless there's something extremely obvious, that someone wishes to address here, my recommendation would be to approve this. And then any other comments that you might have, to just submit them to Christina and the group so that they can be looked at and changed, added, or deleted from the draft at our subsequent meeting.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Ria, thank you for coming on board.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that would be good, but remember, counties already have ability to create a drainage district exclusively to address these issues. As you know, the legislatures are not very keen on giving more authorities to local government and counties. So I just don't know, should we go poke around on this one where we have ability to create a drainage district?
Commissioner Gonzalez, can you mute your camera, sir? Or
Yes,
your
sir, I'm sorry.
microphone? I'm sorry, your microphone. Thank you, sir.
Not the camera.
Not the camera, I apologize.
Okay, yeah, I understand,
Go ahead, Mr.
but I think that we also don't want to restrict ourselves from any future recommendations that we might have for the legislators. Which is, we're not asking for it here. We're just putting it on in case we need to do something. This is an option.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? If not, at this point, I think, again, just to have the record clear, could I have a motion affirming this particular recommendations?
Motion to affirm this recommendation.
Thank you, Raziel. I heard somebody second it. Who was that?
I'll second it. Okay.
Okay, moved in second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same side. Motion carries. And again, please remember, even if you wish to submit something, Ria, please do so that it can be considered as we make amendments to the plan, okay? Christina or Jonathan, whoever's next.
All right. Moving on, as I mentioned, those are and then, so now we have some of the other recommendations regarding regional flood planning process, the process itself, rather than any legislative or administrative to meet the flood management goals. This is the flood planning process that we are currently going through. And any recommendations that should be made for the state of Texas Water Development Board. The comments we received regarding this one are flood planning should include options that do not cause irreparable damage to coastal habitats. And the plan needs to include tools and resources to continuously include all significant impacts to the watershed and floodplain management. So similarly, we took the comments that we received and put them as they were into the recommendation statements. And in this case, we didn't have any other changes to make to those to add flavor to them. It's just, these are recommendations, do not cause irreparable damage to coastal habitats, as well as include the tools to continuously monitor the impacts of watersheds and for purpose of floodplain management.
Okay. Again, the same process. I'll entertain a motion just to be on record in regards to the recommendations.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Laura.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Estrada.
Thank you, Mr. Estrada. Any other comments, concerns, or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
All right. So that concludes task 8 for now. And we'll move on to task 9, which is the flood infrastructure financing analysis. Once again, we covered this one briefly during our meeting 2 meetings ago, and this is the summary of that follow-up, as well as the summary of what we included in our actual draft report that we are presenting today. So, Christina, if you can go back one slide. This is of the flood mitigation activities that were outlined in the plan, as well as what role the state should take in financing the recommended floodplain management strategies. All right. So we earlier in the flood planning process, we polled out what the local funding sources that entities in the Rio Grande Valley use to fund their floodplain management. The results are on stream, and we noticed that a great majority of the respondents, 18 out of 25, use their general fund to fund their flood management activities. Some use bond programs, and even fewer use stormwater utility fees or permitting fees or special tax districts. This is mostly just presented for information purposes and so that we can show how it's currently being done. And we noticed that, like we said, great majority uses from the general fund. And as a result, to carry on that, the need for flood mitigation activities, whether they're strategies or projects themselves, the need is great. We're looking at 161 million for FMEs, 13 million for FMPs, and then 8 million for FMSs. And overall, it's 182,525 in needs alone that have been identified to us for Region 15. That's to date. And there are probably projects that are either too early in development to include here, or if we might not have gotten some responses because of some community doing their own strategy. There's a great need, and as we identified before, 18 out of 25, all of that money is coming out of the general fund. So how does the region actually fund their projects? So next slide. Similarly to the previous one, this is from the same polling opportunity that we did. What were the reasons that the jurisdiction does not seek funding to pay for implementation of flood management strategies? Like I said, we had a great majority use general funds. Now these recommendations, most of them used, so either the project was too early in the plan development, so the timing was not right to apply for funds, or they don't have the funds for technical services needed to apply. Not every county, jurisdiction, or et cetera has the means to apply for every funding opportunity because of the technical requirements to prepare a proper application, as well as that for that expertise. Some of them stated that we just simply couldn't compete with other projects and our project wasn't completed, or that my jurisdiction or my project doesn't meet the specific requirements of these grant programs. Similarly, one of the big ones was the matching funds are not available at this time. We have a need, we don't have the funds. So even though we identified that 18 out of 25 said we do it out of our general fund, that's not always, the general fund is not infinite as it's obvious. So, and then no knowledge of the funding sources, whether because it isn't broadcasted in a way that the jurisdictions keep track of. Now, what we noticed while we were going over this data, there's a lot of overlap between task 8 and task 9 regarding this. So some of the recommendations that we already covered in task 8 do attempt to address some of these. So the rest of what we discussed in this one is what's needed to address the remaining part of those needs. So the project or jurisdiction does not apply. We did include a legislative recommendation to expand that, but meanwhile, some of the other ones we went further to get additional information. So this is what we got from that polling process. The state of Texas should do these steps in order to help assist in financing those flood mitigation activities. They should take additional steps to inform communities of funding opportunities. They should expand the eligibility of projects and entity types under existing programs. So if you have a project that was previously unallowed because you were a drainage district, not another special utility district, or vice versa, this is now, if as long as the project meets the requirements of the goal, you shouldn't be disallowed from doing it. Expand funding opportunities to create new programs for communities or special districts meeting local cost sharing requirements, i.e. historically disadvantaged communities or areas of persistent poverty may need additional needs and they simply don't have the tax base to prepare for projects. That's not necessarily to say that they don't deserve assistance with their funding projects. Provide resources for communities unable to apply due to lack of expertise. We mentioned that they didn't have the resources needed to apply for those programs. Well, what if state of Texas assisted them in getting access to that expertise? Similarly, provide technical resources to provide technical professional services needed for funding opportunities and applications, as well as prioritizing vulnerable communities when considering financing recommendations, and require that all projects include consider impacts to downtown areas. That was one of our additional comments. So it was important to add. So these are the ones that we received from our polling during the process, and similarly, these are what we included in our draft memo for. This is the stance that we believe, based off the input that we got, this is what the stance that we seem like the regional flood planning group would like to take when it comes to how Texas should assist with financing recommended flood mitigation activities.
Again, this was all done with the information that was received by you all from all of us. And what we would like to do here is also just for the record, affirm that these are the things that we'd like to see included, notwithstanding any other comments or thoughts that any of you might have that can be submitted to Jonathan and Christina so that they can be added to the draft plan as it progresses. But at this time, again, we would need another motion to approve this recommendation and move on to the next.
Motion to approve the recommendation.
Second, David Fuentes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Commissioner. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Go ahead and continue, Christina or Jonathan.
All right. We're going to step back to task 7 now. This is more of a follow-up to the previous conversation. We presented information, our strategy. These are the findings of of the information that we got during that time. So, Christina, next slide. So as we mentioned before, task 7 is flood response information activities. This is how the counties or the jurisdictions respond to disasters, particularly what we mentioned earlier in the first meeting discussing this topic. Task 7 FEMA discusses all flood response activities as mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery, and they consider it a cycle. So task 7 was about the planning study itself is about mitigation, while task 7 addresses the other 3 activities. So what the communities do immediately before an event, during the event, and after the event in order to resume to daily lives. And we looked at the hazard mitigation action plans that are in place, either existing, in progress, or even the ones that were previously approved and have expired. We looked at what the counties, what the jurisdictions are doing in order to cover the preparedness activities, the response activities, and the recovery activities. So in general, the summary that we found is that all from the bottom up, the federal government, the state government, the local government, even the citizens all have an active role in flood response and mitigation, in the mitigation, response, recovery, and all the task 7 activities. So they go from FEMA, TDEM, the counties and cities, and from a top down, it's the level of responsibility, but also at the same time, it's from the bottom up, understanding the needs. The citizens know their immediate needs more than the city does. The city knows theirs more than the state does, and so on and so forth.
And of course, at the bottom of it is a citizen, which is a critical one.
Right.
Which is what it builds on.
Right. The citizens know what they need, but they may not know what their neighbor needs. It's the job of people above them to coordinate all of the citizens together in order to do it. And that's why we kind of identified it as a shared responsibility between all parties. Sure, the federal government or the state government can make actions, but without being able to fine tune it, they may miss. And it's important to identify that and include it during the and include that in our flood response information and activities. All right, so from our similar polls, entities with whom you coordinate your flood and coordinate with to improve flood response activities. From the bottom, rather than looking at this from like going down the list, we'll just look at it from the who actually gets included when he goes, and you can see that the county is considered one of the biggest resources for this, and then TDEM, National Weather Service, TxDOT, even this, then the cities, FEMA, and Council of City Governments, and it moves down from there. The county, it takes a very big bulk of that role, especially because of how, in general, everyone inherently knows that flooding is a regional issue. So the biggest region that they work with is typically the county itself. So preparedness activities that we identified, and keep in mind these are from the in place, either the current or in development or expired plans. We kind of understood that even if the expired plan may be expired, but that doesn't mean that the counties and the organizations stop doing those activities. Just because it hasn't been updated doesn't mean how the response is actually conducted. It just means that they haven't updated the plan as per the guidelines that are put forth. So the preparedness activities that we identified that most people use are early warning systems, such as National Weather Service saying a storm is coming, it is expected to be of this magnitude, please make the proper arrangements. Education and suggested response activities, just standard information on how the community should respond in the event of an upcoming storm. Procurement of emergency response equipment, such as a drainage district acquiring mobile pump platforms in order to dewater an area that gets hit particularly hard, as well as the hazard mitigation planning activities themselves, such as developing that hazard mitigation plan. That's all considered preparedness. So response activities, effects during and immediately after a flood, distribution of emergency supplies to the population, such as sandbags. I think every time, I know personally, every time a storm comes in, I hear mention, okay, if you're in this area, you can go to this location in order to pick up sandbags to protect your home. As well as deployment of emergency response equipment and activities, rescuing someone who may be stranded, removing debris from a drainage structure that may be impeding flow, resulting in flooding downstream. Those mobile platforms that were required during the preparation, we need to deploy them and use them. And then notification systems so that in the event of an evacuation, hey, the route that you may be taking is currently closed. You need to go somewhere else. These are all part of those response activities that we identified that are currently being done by the counties and the jurisdictions in order to protect the lives, livelihood, and everything of the citizens themselves. And then following up, in order to go back to normal, restoration efforts after flood, in order to go back to normal, the restoration of utilities in the event that something went down, a power line went down, or a water line burst, restoring that utility so that they can go back to normal. Removal of excess debris. Whenever either trash gets moved, gets put into a drainage ditch, debris, everything that would prevent it from going back to normal needs to be removed in order to get taken care of. The continued response of that emergency equipment, such as, well, our pump platforms, the storm's over, but our pump platforms are still needed in order to continue dewatering this area because there's just so much of a buildup. And then the documentation of activities for future mitigation efforts. This is actually one of the biggest ones that we identified. Was just because planning didn't include something doesn't mean that it shouldn't be included on future activities. Hey, this activity that in specific worked really well, let's make sure we include it on our next hazard mitigation action plan. And then similarly, damage assessment and reparations. This particular piece of information of flooding mitigation structure failed. this is why it failed, this is the damage as a result, and this is how it needs to be replaced for the future. All of these it's a cycle of how these preparedness activities feed back into the mitigation process. And like I said, this is all things that the jurisdictions and the counties already do, which was what task 7 was all about. What does the community already do in order to make mitigation easier for everybody? All right, and with that, I will pass it back to Christina.
Jonathan.
Yes, sir.
There's a question by Mr. Khalifa. I think it's appropriate at this time, Mr. Khalifa, that you go ahead and ask it.
Certainly.
We can't hear you, Mr. Khalifa.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Hello,
Yes,
hello?
sir.
Does anybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You can hear me? Yeah, non-governmental agencies that are in there, I know.
Yeah, your connection, we're losing you, Mr. Khalifa. You know, you're on in and out. Mr. Khalifa, you're in and out.
During and after Salvation Army and the Baptist after a flood event or yeah.
Guess I should have hit the right.
I heard Salvation Army and maybe Red Cross.
I sent Mr. Khalifa a note because I couldn't hear very much except a few.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you can put it in the comments.
Yeah, can you put it in the comments?
Still breaking up. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Joe, if you would put it in the comments.
I'll do that. Let's see if somebody else has another comment.
Okay. Please, just include it in the comments section. Okay, Christina, you on?
Yes, sir, I'm on. I can go on and then we can revisit Mr. Khalifa's comment.
Yes,
so
please.
Task 5, this is really the meat of the plan. This is where we recommend the FMXs. And so I'm going to use that term. It's just an easy way of summarizing the FMEs, which are your evaluations or your studies, any kind of analysis that's done. Your FMSs, which were strategies. These were things that weren't easily identified as a project or a study. And then the FMPs, which are your projects. And those are, where you're actually expending money to build something. There's some capital costs. So all of them share the same initial screening. And these are the steps. These are old slides that you saw when we adopted the process in 4B. So step 1 was to do the basic analysis, initial screening. And this actually weeded out a lot of them. Well, not many, but it does weed out a good share. So the first thing that we screened for is whether it lined up with one of the flood management goals. And we actually were pretty good. Didn't really screen out many because of that. Meeting an emergency goal. And really the way we defined an emergency goal is whether it was in an area where there was a previous federal disaster declaration, a major disaster declaration, and whether it impacted critical facilities. So really that applies to a lot because I think all of our counties were in areas that had a disaster declaration. And they had to address a drainage area of 1 square mile or greater and address the 100-year flood storm, the 1% annual chance flood, which not every study does. And so that's a big one that communities, will need to reevaluate because it's all based on the 100-year storm or the 1% annual chance. So when we looked at FMEs, these are your studies or analysis that need to be done. And, this is really what needs to be done so that you can get your flood risk maps. A lot of these came from the Hazard Mitigation Action Plan. And when you list them in the Hazard Mitigation Action Plan, all the level of detail I really get is a little description, the name, who's responsible for it, time of completion, and a dollar amount. It really doesn't give me all the other information. So a lot of the projects that are identified in those are actually listed as an FME on our plan. We also did the gaps. So all the places where we included Fathom, where there was no detail, that's a list of FMEs. The needs. So task 4, we really get into on the watershed level, where are these? There's a lot of overlap in those, but the needs assessment, and then, like we said, unfunded projects. So there's already been studies that were identified. If it's a study and analysis, these are included in there. So the other screen, so once we go past that is, does it make sense? Do we have the dollar amounts, and does it have a sponsor? So all of that was taken into account, and we came up with our FMEs as they stand today, the ones that are easily can check the boxes. These meet their criteria, fall into these 3 categories. So the first one is flood risk modeling and mapping. So these are, all the areas that don't have a detailed study. Those are the ones identified in 2 and 4. Flood mitigation alternative analysis and feasibility study. So these are areas where we know flood, where we talk about, historically this area floods, but there's no study really defining it. So it goes a little like one step further than just identifying the flood risk and defining like, this floods at this level of service of, it really defines what's the alternative, like how are you solving that? So it takes it a little bit further. And those are what flood mitigation alternative analysis category covers. And then the preliminary engineering is really for those projects that maybe I do have a master drainage plan or an hydraulics, an H&H study provided to us, but I don't know if it addresses the no negative effects, what its BCA is. Like there is still more evaluation and analysis that needs to be done to see if it really does meet all the criteria of an FMP. So those are the FME categories. And when we go through, at least at this level where we are today, we had 82 submitted, and we're recommending 80 of these to proceed on for a total of $161 million. This is by far the biggest category where the biggest need is, because we don't have a lot of areas that are mapped and mapped well. So, I mean, we need this to be able to identify more FMPs and FMSs. Like this is like the first step. And so as a region, this is where we are. Most of our region needs to have mapping done because it's outdated or it's just not detailed and not reflective. Now, as far as projects, projects are the meat, and this is really what our citizens want to see, right? The action. Screening for projects, and we knew this in the beginning, the criteria for an actual recommended FMEs, it's stringent. So, like I said, it had to meet a goal, it had to address the 100-year storm, it had to meet emergency need, but more importantly, what really weeded out a lot of these is, it had to have a BCA over 1, and there needed to be some kind of certification that there is no negative effect. So just because a project's identified and there's some analysis, you do need a there needs to be some kind of certification from the engineers that, you know, you're not impacting people downstream or upstream because of this project. And without that, it cannot go. So you can recommend it as an FME and do a little bit more analysis, and then the next round, move it up. And hopefully we get to do some of that. I'm not sure. But that's why there are so few. So when I say so few, so far we have 2. And these both came from FAR's master drainage plan. There is comments addressing the no negative impacts. I mean, obviously they had more than 2 projects listed, but just to show you that, you know, the criteria is stringent enough that it really needs to be a bigger project that's really vetted and get to that. So I'm confident that there will be more, you know, as long as what we're lacking is that more enriched outreach, right? So, you know, once we get this amendment and we're able to do it, you know, really sit down and talk to these communities, I'm confident that we can increase this list, and that's really the goal. But these 2 projects alone are $13 million, and these are the ones I can easily check the box. The other ones, there is some leeway. I think that what I'd like to do is in August, really sit down, you know, and really go through the projects with the RFPG or technical committee and go through these, the remaining ones, the ones that, you know, and go and discuss and put them out there for comments. So that's the plan. In August, really do some enhanced outreach, and then the following 2 months, come back and fine tune this list. So remaining are strategies. And again, it covers a wide range of topics. And really the thing about strategies is identifying, you know, a sponsor for them and the cost. And so we have a lot. I mean, a lot of these deal with, you know, outreach, flow measurements, backup generation, regulatory and guidance. It's those, you know, softer things that aren't a construction project or an analysis. So there's a number of them. We're recommending 69 for a total of $8 million. And again, we'll go through all of these, but you know, these are the ones that in our evaluation we could easily check. And so that really summarizes like where we are as far as chapter 5. You know, these are the steps that I mentioned before, but going through all the steps, going to chapter 5, and then putting them out for comments, and then adopting it for final, before the final adoption.
Which would be next year.
Yeah.
I know that was a lot of information presented by Christina in regards to the processes that they've been following. I would like to recommend something to the board and see what your thoughts are, just so that we can help move some of these processes along. And, you know, the recommendation that I would like to make is I would like to set up, and Jaime, listen to me, and Megan, please, because if this is out of line, I need to know. But what I would like to set up is a subcommittee of willing volunteers from our flood planning infrastructure group, maybe 4 or 5 people that would be willing to help go through with Christina and her group the evaluation and the processing that they did to come up with those studies of all the other ones that need to be evaluated and looked at more carefully, so that then they can make a recommendation to the committee to see, or to the group, I'm sorry, so that we can, you know, make sure and agree with their recommendation and move them forward, or add or delete some that we might think we need to add or delete. But this is just a thought, and I'd like to hear what some of you all think about that recommendation.
Commissioner, this is David Fuentes. I would welcome that opportunity if that's something that you're exploring. I would be willing to help out with our experience and responding to situations and projects all over the main system that outfalls most of Hidalgo County. I think that, we could lend some experience with that and help. We know statistically that great projects sometimes don't always score right. So I think that, having some insight into systems and how it might be more impactful for a project that maybe scores a little bit better. Not that we subjectively start ranking and moving things around, but sometimes our best projects don't score well for various reasons. So
Yeah,
if
totally,
that-
especially when it comes to a BSA sometimes.
yeah, the cost benefit or benefit cost, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Those sometimes don't align well, even though it's got a major impact. So if you're looking for a volunteer, if you do decide to do that, I would welcome that opportunity.
Okay. Okay, yeah, and I just want to make sure with Jaime and Megan, this is something that's in line what we can do, right? Because we're not delegating the authority to make the decisions, just to recommend to the board.
Yes, that's exactly right, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
And I do just want to make sure, Commissioner, when you said volunteers, you mean from among the planning group, right?
From among the planning group, yes, ma'am.
Right, yes, and I would say, yeah, as long as the subcommittee doesn't reach a quorum of the group, right? Yeah, and otherwise everything you're saying is exactly right.
If we have that many people volunteering, that would be fantastic, but I
would just call another meeting.
Yeah, this is gonna be work, yeah. But this is gonna be work and it would help facilitate the process. And again, I would be looking for some folks that have experience, that have been with boots on the ground, either the board or a proxy that someone would like to put on, I would also think would be appropriate if that's the case, because I think what we need people that have been on the ground with issues so that they can understand, just as David said, Commissioner Fuentes said, that it's more easily understood once you've done it versus cold turkey and into it, So if we can do that, David, I'll make you kind of like lead that committee. I'm going to have a proxy that I'd like to include in there, which is a person from our county that has been very involved for a number of years with the same type of issues that you mentioned, that has a lot more expertise than I do. So I would volunteer as a proxy to me, Augusto Sanchez, that is with us, one of our employees here. But I would like to see if any, maybe Mia or Sonia or Alan or, some folks in that arena.
Yeah, I recommend Sonia. I nominate Sonia.
Okay, Sonia didn't even get it. She didn't have a chance to volunteer.
Chairman, we would put an item, I guess, on our next agenda to request approval to create the committee. And then at that time, we can discuss, possible appointments if you'd like to do that too.
Well, I'd like to discuss possible appointments today.
Okay, sir.
I mean, these are part of the task 5, needs, okay?
That's fine, sir.
And then we can ratify it at the subsequent meeting.
Yes, sir.
So Sonia, are you willing to help us?
Sure, I'll be okay with it. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else out there,
I also recommend Alan Moore.
If Sonia's willing to, I'm willing to.
Okay. The great help, anyone else? Mia, did you say yes? If he doesn't respond, that's a yes.
I think I heard him say yes.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So Roselle Mia, we put on there. And if there's no one else, the other person that I would like to, Joe Khalifa would like to help. That would be great, Joe. Thank you for letting us know. And, that probably would be enough if it's nowhere close to a quorum. So if anyone else, we'll put it out whenever they're going to meet. And if somebody, as long as everybody doesn't chime in, would be okay. But one or two other people would be okay. Okay. So put it on the agenda, Jaime, make a note for the next meeting so that we can approve them as our subcommittee. And go from there. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Christina, any other comments?
Mr. Mia had to log off to attend another meeting, sir. FYI.
Okay. Okay.
No,
Anything
sir.
else? Anything else we have to get to, Christina? If you could look, please move the next slide up, just to make sure everybody knows where we're at with what we need to get done. You know, the draft plan that we discussed today with the minor modifications that were included will be delivered on August 1st for us. So we will have the plan delivered to the Water Development Board on time. In September, we have to have some public meetings to accept comments on the draft plan that is being submitted. I am proposing that we have a meeting in our area of the southern part of the region and one meeting in the Laredo area and the more northwestern part of the region, so that we could hopefully be able to invite all the different folks to be able to access us and make some comments and give us their input. And, you know, by October, we review all those comments. In November, we review the draft that has been submitted. And then in December, we would approve the draft reviewed document so that it can be submitted as a final in January. Okay.
Commissioner, if I may.
And that's the draft document, okay? The flood plan document with the amendments will be due in July 14th of 2023. Yes, sir, Mr. Cali.
So I'm going to reference the meeting that we had yesterday for the RORAC. Christina, you may want to have some guidance with respect to ARPA and other COVID type response programs that the federal government has out there. There was some questions about what kind of drainage projects and flood mitigation projects qualify under American Rescue Plan. Now, as we've moved through this, that's going to expire by itself because of time constraints, but you may want to have at least some comments prepared as to, you know, that it probably wouldn't apply to these as we move forward, because there are some people that are asking about how many of these projects are going to be done with that kind of money.
Okay.
They may think it's perpetual, that it never ends.
And yeah, and it's not, unfortunately.
So you may want to just say because of time and the timing of the projects after all of this stuff is implemented into a bigger plan, that's not really going to be a funding mechanism for projects as we move forward. If that's in fact true, but that's my assumption.
Yeah. Yeah, there's folks out there that think that the golden goose is in the ARPA funds, and unfortunately it's not.
And you're saying to include this in chapter 9, just make a mention of ARPA not being a permanent.
I'm not
Yes.
sure which one, but just in
One of
general.
them.
Yeah, it's 9 that deals with financing. Okay,
Right. Okay.
noted.
Just-
I will include that.
Just because when we start having these public meetings, okay, more than likely, we will be getting some comments in regard to the ARPA funds being utilized.
And understood.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to ask Chairman before we move on. It was 7E, the presentation, discussion, and possible action. I think we need to formally approve submission of the approval and submission of the draft.
Right. Yeah,
Because today and all the actions that we took today, is that what you mean?
no,
In general?
no, today, the next item that we have to take formal action on before I lose more people is submitting the draft report by August 1st. As
Motion
we've
to
already,
approve.
as
I
we've
motion to approve
discussed
that,
it.
Commissioner.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second, Alan.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Okay, we will submit the report in a timely manner approved by the board today. Okay. Christina, anything else?
Not for me, Chairman.
Thank you. Jaime, any comments received since we began the meeting? Public comments?
None received, Chairman.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Did we set the next agenda date? Next.
Item
No, sir,
number 9.
we will send it out to you. It'll be the end of the month of August.
Sounds good. Then I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you all so much for your time and your input. You know, we look forward to our next meeting, which would more than likely be around the third week of August on a Thursday at about the same time. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Megan.